Power politics rarely show themselves this clearly. 5 formal demands arrived from Washington, each aimed at a different part of Canada's economy: agriculture, digital media, provincial trade retaliation, government contracts, energy. Most leaders would respond quietly, soften their tone, or look for a private compromise. Mark Carney did something else. He rejected all 5 demands publicly and without delay. That decision did not create a shouting match. It created a strategic standoff. Behind every demand sat a deeper question about leverage and dependence. And behind every refusal stood a calculation. The first demand focused on agriculture, especially dairy. American producers have long argued that Canada's supply management system limits access to its market. Under current rules, U.S. farmers can export a set amount tariff-free. Above that limit, tariffs can climb above 200%. Washington described this as unfair and asked for expanded access. Carney's response was firm. Supply management protects Canadian farmers and rural communities. Canada has passed laws that reinforce this system, making it difficult to reverse quickly. By rejecting the demand, Carney signaled that food security and domestic stability would not be traded away. The second demand targeted digital media laws. Canada's Online Streaming Act requires large platforms to invest part of their Canadian revenue into local content. The Online News Act requires big technology companies to compensate publishers when they use news links. Washington argued that these rules unfairly target American tech firms, such as streaming and social media platforms. U.S. officials framed the laws as barriers to digital trade. Ottawa framed them as cultural protection. Without such rules, Canadian media companies could struggle to compete against global giants. Carney stated clearly that cultural policy was not a bargaining tool. The third demand centered on provincial retaliation measures. After U.S. tariffs were placed on certain Canadian goods, several provinces limited the sale of American alcohol products in government-run stores. Washington asked Canada to lift these restrictions as part of broader trade discussions. The sequence of events matters. Tariffs came first. Provincial responses came second. U.S. negotiators wanted the retaliation removed, while American tariffs remained in place. From Ottawa's perspective, that would mean accepting economic penalties without response. Carney declined. The message was simple: remove the tariffs and the countermeasures can be discussed. Until then, the measures would stand. This exchange highlighted a balance principle. Trade relationships operate on reciprocity. When one side applies pressure, the other often responds. By refusing to lift provincial restrictions without broader changes, Canada reinforced that balance. The fourth demand focused on government procurement. U.S. officials argued that provinces such as Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia favor domestic suppliers when awarding public contracts. Washington described this as discriminatory. Yet the United States has its own Buy American policies that prioritize domestic companies in federal projects, including infrastructure and defense contracts. The request placed Canada in a position where it would need to open its markets more widely, while the United States maintained protective policies of its own. Carney did not respond with sharp language. He responded with a policy comparison. Public procurement shapes local jobs and industrial capacity. By rejecting the demand, Ottawa signaled that it would not dismantle its internal economic tools without equivalent change from its partner. The fifth demand concerned energy. U.S. representatives raised concerns about cross-border electricity flows and broader energy policies. Yet the larger picture shows that the United States imports roughly 3.8 million barrels of Canadian crude oil per day. Around 20% of U.S. refinery input comes from Canada. Certain American refineries are designed specifically to process heavy Canadian crude. In winter, parts of the northeastern United States rely on Canadian electricity to stabilize their grids. Carney rejected structural changes that would weaken Canada's energy position. The refusal carried weight because energy is not symbolic. It powers homes, vehicles, and factories. By standing firm, Ottawa signaled that its role in continental energy security is significant and measurable. This is where many observers misread the situation. Some assume that rejecting 5 demands weakens Canada's hand. But each demand also revealed areas where the United States has interests at stake. Agriculture shows American producers seek Canadian markets. Digital policy debates highlight revenue exposure for U.S. technology firms. Procurement arguments reveal the importance of public contracts. Energy statistics show deep integration. Rather than shrinking Canada's position, the list exposed pressure points across the American economy. Leverage in trade is not only about size, it is about interdependence. One major sector stood out because it was not emphasized in the demands: automobiles. North America's auto industry operates as a tightly linked network. Parts often cross the border multiple times before a finished vehicle reaches a showroom. Canadian plants produce components for American trucks. U.S. factories manufacture engines used in Canadian assembly lines. Industry leaders have warned that abrupt changes or permanent tariffs could raise costs across the region. The silence around autos suggested caution. Disrupting that system would affect companies and workers on both sides of the border. At the same time, Canada has worked to expand its trade relationships beyond the United States. Agreements with European partners and outreach to Asian markets provide alternative outlets for agricultural goods and industrial exports. Canada has also emphasized critical minerals used in clean energy technologies and advanced manufacturing. These resources are important for electric vehicles, batteries, and modern electronics. Diversification does not eliminate dependence overnight, but it reduces vulnerability over time. As the next review period for the trade agreement approaches, several paths remain possible. The agreement could be extended in its current form. It could move into a system of regular reviews that create ongoing negotiation. Either country could decide to withdraw, introducing new tariffs and uncertainty. Uncertainty affects investors and manufacturers across North America. Nearly 150 American industry leaders have urged stability, emphasizing the importance of predictable rules. Trade frameworks are not only political documents. They shape hiring decisions, factory planning, and supply contracts. The choices made in Washington and Ottawa will influence economic conditions far beyond government offices. In the end, 5 demands met 5 refusals. The exchange did not produce dramatic speeches or immediate breakthroughs. It produced clarity. Each side showed its priorities. Canada emphasized sovereignty in agriculture, culture, procurement, and energy. The United States highlighted market access and policy change.